All right, it looks like we got enough people in here now, so let's go ahead and just jump in. Welcome to this morning's breakfast. I am Julia from the Bookworm Bookstore in Powder Springs, Georgia. This is our international meets New York City vibe, so I'm a little excited about that. I'm originally born and raised in New York, hence all the hand talking over here you'll see a lot of. Although I'm in Georgia, I tend to do that a lot, and I think that happens to me because I was born and raised in New York. We have a great group of authors this morning. I had an amazing time reading all of their books, and I think you guys will truly enjoy it. We're going to kind of just get some housekeeping rules out of the way. Thank you to our published sponsors, Simon & Schuster, Source Books, Little Brown & Co., and Grove Atlantic. They have provided this opportunity for us, so we greatly appreciate it. Although this is a conversation, there's no Q&A section, so please feel free to communicate in the chat, your comments, shout out your bookstore, where you're from. We definitely say hello to the authors. We will definitely appreciate it. We're gonna jump right in with Adrian Mckenzie, whose book is behind me. I can't know if you can see it. Adrian Mckenzie grew up in Northern Ireland. He studied philosophy at Oxford University before moving to Australia and then to New York. He is the author of more than a dozen crime novels. His books have been translated into over 30 languages, and he has won many awards. His newest book, The Island, actually debuted yesterday. So congratulations, late happy pub day. And it's a thriller you cannot put down. I don't even know where to begin with Adrian. I didn't know if I should even put you on the front end, the back end. Your book kept me going from beginning to end. I don't know where your mind even gathered all of that information and how you even operated that way. So why don't you talk a little bit about The Island?
Well, it sort of began as a true story. Like you say, I was born in Northern Ireland, but my wife is from New York, and I met her at uni and followed her back to New York and basically lived in New York City. And then we had an opportunity about 12 or 13 years ago to move to Australia. She got offered a job in Melbourne. So we took the kids and moved to Oz for like a decade. And it seemed like a really fun adventure. And I loved it. I'm a big, I was growing up as a big Mad Max freak. And so the very first thing I did when I arrived in Melbourne, I drove to the place where they filmed Mad Max, which is just about an hour north out of the city, and drove all those roads with Max. And then I drove about 6 or 7 hours further north into the desert where they filmed The Road Warrior, Mad Max 2. And that's an even crazier landscape of dinosaur cars and desert. And it's just fantastic out there. But anyway, the island began as a real trip. We were driving along the coast of Australia, and we came to this very remote island that you had to take a ferry across to. Not many tourists go there. And we take the ferry over, and the first thing we see is guys with shotguns broken up over their shoulders walking around. And that's really unusual in Australia because they have very strict gun controls. You never see long guns ever, anywhere, ever. And so that was odd. And they were shooting rabbits. And when we got to this farm for lunch, they knew all about us from us talking to the ferry owner, and he'd walkie-talkied who we were. And then we found out that the island was all one large extended family, originally from Ireland, and now lived in this island by themselves. And the mood was quite weird, a little awkward and strange. And they made a few off-color remarks about my wife, and I thought, let's just get out of here. This is really odd, this place. I don't like it. I was getting real Deliverance vibes, and maybe that stuff was in my head, but maybe it wasn't. And all the time we were there, we just kept hearing gunfire, as they were shooting all the time. And so the guy on the ferry had told us very strictly, he'd said, make sure you make the last ferry off at 3:30 or you'll be staying the night here. And we did not want to stay the night there because we'd be sleeping in our car. We had the kids in the back, and it was February in Australia, which is hard to comprehend the heat that we give. It's about 42 degrees Celsius, which is about 110 Fahrenheit. And it's this dry, baking, no ozone layer intense Australian heat. So we thought, I'm going to get this bloody ferry. So I started driving the car really fast back towards the ferry because it was about 10 past 3. I didn't want to miss it. And on the sides of the road, there's this long, skinny, yellow Australian grass called spinifex, where you can't really see what's happening. And then out of the grass, this lady on a bicycle comes, and she's wearing a hearing aid, and she swerves right onto the road in front of us. And I honk the horn and slam on the brakes, and she's here and we're here, and the car just goes like that. And then she carries on oblivious, completely not knowing that we were behind her. I guess the hearing aid was turned off, or maybe the battery wasn't working or something. So she doesn't know that we almost hit her. And the mood was so strange and weird. And I was trembling at the steering wheel, literally shaking, as you do following something like that. And I turned to my wife as a kind of a joke and said, if we had hit her, we wouldn't have got off this island alive. And my wife very seriously said, I don't think we would have. And then a couple of years later, when I was coming to write a book, and I thought, wait a minute, we did hit her. That's the book. That's the entire book. You're on this deserted, you're a family from America, you're tourists, you shouldn't really be there. You're on this island that you've trespassed, and there's an accident with one of the locals. And then what happens next? And terrible, terrible things happen. Really, really, really bad things. But everything, I think, is within the logic of that universe. Everything that happens unfolds naturally from that initial setup. So once the parameters are set up, scary island, scary people, really unfortunate accident, and then everything that happens should be completely logical. It's one of those books where once you set it up, the book sort of writes itself, because everything that happens should flow naturally. So really bad stuff happens.
Yeah, it did. But you just brought a lot of clarity. You did. I think anybody who read you have to read this book. I think one, not even just hearing your story, it just makes so much sense. But the way clearly you can now, knowing that was a trip for you, I now know how you felt about those people on the island. Because that you had them. There was a lot going on there. So without
and the landscape as well. I mean, I tried so hard to convey. Just the heat and the mosquitoes and scariness, and it's one of those places where no phone service, so you just feel completely isolated. And it's this island, and literally on the ferry over, we saw great white sharks on the water. So there's no way you're getting off. You're not swimming for it. The family controls the ferry. So once you're there, you're there. And it's not a big island either. It's kind of like a locked room mystery, because you're basically in this small contained space. And I love those kind of things where you're in one area and you just have to try to figure it out, what you're going to do.
Well, thank you for it. I think you guys should definitely pick that one up and add it to the shelves. Let's just jump right in to IMAN HARIRI-KIA. She is a writer and editor born and raised in New York City. A nationally acclaimed journalist, she covers sex, relationships, identity, and adolescence. You can often find her writing about her personal life on the internet, much to her parents' dismay. Her debut novel, 100 Other Girls, kind of gives you that Devil Wears Prada feel in the literary world. Another great book. So Iman, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we have to look forward to when it releases?
I have to tell you, Julia, every time I hear my bio read back to me, I promise myself I'm going to change it after the panel discussion. Then I always forget. So thank you again for that reminder.
Absolutely. It's fabulous.
I am also born and raised in New York. So if I hit the computer screen with my hand while I'm talking, you'll know I have an excuse.
Totally understand.
So yes, I think you hit the nail on the head. This really does feel like a update from The Devil Wears Prada on where the industry is today. My debut novel follows Nora, who's a young Middle Eastern woman who's recently graduated from college. She's a little lost. She's tutoring rich Upper East Side kids and crashing on her sister's couch. And then she gets that, once in a lifetime opportunity to work for her favorite culture magazine, which is called Vinyl. And the pages of Vinyl are very near and dear to Nora. They taught her basically everything from how to insert a tampon to who to vote for. So when she arrives, she thinks it's going to be sick, but quickly learns that all is not as it appears. The print and digital teams are basically in a full-blown turf war with each other. And obviously, as is all internal politics in the world, the intrigue of media, chaos ensues almost immediately. And with her dream job in the line, both teams are pressuring her to pick a side. She basically has to decide if she's going to go with the future of the magazine, the past nostalgia that she's always felt really drawn to, or if she's going to form her own. So I love the story here because it really follows the decline of the publishing industry, the rise of digital media, identity exploitation. There's a spicy workplace romance, sisterhood, and a lot more. I like to think of it sort of as like a coming of age story, but for women in their 20s. And the writing is very accessible and fun, sort of like an adult book for lovers of YA. But similarly to Adrian, the story is very personal to me. Like most first generation children, I really grew up with a foot in two different worlds. I never really felt Western enough to be considered fully American, not Middle Eastern enough to be considered fully Iranian. And I grew up similarly to Nora, taking solace in big sister magazines. And I really felt like these magazines gave me a sense of belonging. So I resolved that to one day become a writer and to give back, in a sense, to this community that gave so much to me. So decades later, after a lot of hard work, I was lucky enough to land a coveted position at one of my favorite magazines as assistant to the editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue, only to watch pretty much in disbelief as the company fell apart right before my eyes, and the print edition was unexpectedly folded. The entire staff got laid off in one day. And as everyone started to pack their desks, industry veterans are wiping away tears. It's a scene. I was just left wondering what the hell happened and how we got here. And the concept for 100 Other Girls was born later that day. I realized that there really hadn't been a truthful depiction of the industry since The Devil Wears Prada, which predates the digital media boom. And as someone who's worked at every level of the industry, from intern to top editor, I want to draw a picture of publications struggling to survive and departments fighting each other for resources and generational editors basically taking swings in the dark to remain relevant. So that's just a small overview of how the book came to be.
Yes. And I actually love how you actually included part of your heritage and culture within the writing of your book. That's always something that's important to me, that we all encompass. I think we all learn so much from literature. So that was great to see that you pulled that in. There is a line in the book, which kind of I wanted to ask you. You wrote in there during one of the scenes, and again, I don't want to give anything away, but it says, is there anybody, and you're in the office area, and is there anybody in my life who likes me for who I am, whoever I am, not because of what I can do for them? I thought that was just powerful in and of itself. But I love how you tie that into the scenario, and also coming from a different culture, it made things just make so many sense. Can you quickly just give us where that came from, if there was any personal relevance to that?
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much for outing that line. So something that the book really explores, not only through its characters, but through the rise and fall and the tension within this company, is the difference between representation and tokenization. And this idea that all of these talented, young, hungry, hardworking people are being brought in to increase diversity and to bring new perspectives to media, to companies, but then they're getting exploited for their identities and they're expected to basically become a talking mouth for an entire group of people, and they're not given equal opportunities past being, a spokesperson for their cultural heritage. And something that Nora learns very quickly at Final is that everyone has an agenda, including her. And she has to sort of scale past the black and white and find a shade of gray that she feels comfortable operating in, or get out altogether. And I think that this is a problem that a lot of young, diverse people are facing today. And I'm hopeful that as Nora really tries to navigate this fine line between identity, representation, and tokenization, the reader will as well.
That's great. Again, another great read. I thank you. I think as booksellers, it's going to be an easy sell for us. And congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So next up, we got Sopan Deb. He's a writer for the New York Times, where his topics have included sports and culture. He's also the author of the memoir, Mistranslations, Meeting the Immigrant Parents Who Raised Me. In addition to being a journalist and author, he's also a comedian. Sopan's debut novel, KEYA's Second Act, is where his journalistic and comedic side kind of blend together. Thank you for joining us, and thank you again for your gracious opportunity to be on this panel. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here. I also want to particularly shout out East City Bookshop in Washington, D.C. Real pleasant surprise to see them here, because that is my neighborhood bookshop that is down the street from my apartment, and it's really cool to see them here. So my book is KEYA's Second Act. That's it right there. So at a basic level, it tracks this Bengali American family that's been split apart by grief. When the book starts, we find out that the family's teenage daughter died in a car accident. And I've been thinking a lot about grief and forgiveness and redemption over the last couple of years, particularly because of my own relationships with my family, which I explored in my previous memoir. And because pandemic, there's a lot of grief going on. And so the book tracks this family that's been split apart, and at some point so one of the characters discovers a play that the late teenager wrote, who was part of the theater program. And in a way of trying to come together, the family decides to stage the play off Broadway, despite knowing nothing about theater. It's a book that is set in New Jersey, where I grew up. There's a lot of personal touches here. It's set in the Bengali American community that I grew up in. Every character is named after a family friend I had growing up. I've particularly been interested in the last couple of years in South Asian family dynamics. And it's not something I've read a lot in fiction, when I was growing up. It was really just kind of Jhumpa Lahiri and a handful of other writers. And I wanted to really write a book about Bengali American family dynamics. And so a lot of this book is set in, my personal connections. So for example, I was part of the theater program at the high school that I went to. I played Oscar, the piano player, in 42nd Street my freshman year of high school, which did not win a Tony, unfortunately, but next time. I've written about theater extensively for the New York Times. There are, it just goes on and on. There's just a lot of very personal things in the book, but ultimately I think the book is an optimistic book. It's a book about hope. It's a book about love and family love. And there are a couple different things that explore South Asian family dynamics. For example, explores mental health. Mental health is very much stigmatized in the South Asian community. It explores, the mom that we meet in the book is divorced. South Asian and divorce, that typically doesn't happen. It's a very stigmatized thing. And so, it explores a lot of those things. And, I hope that, it's also funny at times, at least I hope it's funny. like with many things.
It is.
I was gonna say, like with many things, I often think I'm a lot funnier than other people do, and unfortunately, it's tough navigating that sometimes, as my wife will tell you. And so anyway, so those are the basics of the book, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I hope that people like it. But ultimately, I think this is a book about the changing power of art. And whether redemption is truly possible, should it be possible in certain cases, and whether human beings can really change over time.
And I definitely like, one of the things that stood out to me, one of the things that stood out the most is how deep rooted your culture was in there. And it was clear that, to me, it was clear that the names were definitely important. Traditions were important. It actually encouraged me to look up certain things. So I think as a reader, that's going to be great. As we, all want to bring the world together through literacy and learn from each other in our culture. You gave us the opportunity to do that through the book, because there's so much in there. You're like, oh, wait, what's that? And what does that mean? And let's dig deeper into that. So I think that was, I always think that's a great thing. And you tied that a lot throughout the book. There was a quote in your book that stood out to me as well. Two things. And you said Indians are typically not known for seeing therapists. That was in the book. And around that, it also said, death is what you say it is. Death can be permanent. It is in the most ways, but there are ways for people to live that don't include being alive. And there are ways to be dead while still being able to breathe. I think while saying that in that whole synopsis, that right there was powerful. Coming from a culture who, again, therapy, again, in the Black culture is not something that's easily accepted as well. So I love how you threw that piece in there, and that kind of quote. Can you give me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, you just made that sound way more profound than I intended. I promise. Whoa, that sounds pretty cool. Whoa.
That was cool, right?
Who wrote that? No, I do think, I'll give an example here. My father is the example of this. My father and I went 11 years without seeing each other. And when I wrote my memoir, which is about spending a year trying to reconnect with them and trying to find out where they lived. And, I didn't know where he was living or anything. And in the 10 years or so, in the immediate years, so my dad left the US and moved back to India without telling anybody when I was around 18, 19 years old. And he just left. And I woke up one morning and he was gone, and I didn't know where he went, and I didn't see him for a while. When he first got to India, he was alive, but he was kind of dead inside. And I think about that a lot, because he really didn't have family to rely on. He didn't have friends. He didn't have much to live for at that point. He had been laid off from work. He didn't have much going on a day-to-day basis. And I realize that sounds dark, but once he started building his life up in India, and he started trying to live again, he started taking tennis lessons, and I didn't know any of this because we weren't in touch at that point. But he started, taking singing lessons. He started taking classes of academic classes, and all this other stuff. And so when I saw him for the first time, 11 years later, so this is in 2017, 2018, whenever it was, he looked so vibrant. He looked tan. He looked kind of, a little bit muscular, a little bit, and he had a kind of spring in his step. And it just, it was a good example of, to me, as something I've always stuck with is what we do in life. It's being dead or alive is not necessarily about breathing. It's about how you live your life. It's about how you go about it. And in terms of the mental health part of it, I saw a therapist for years in my 20s. And I really recommend, there are two things I recommend to everybody in their 20s or even not in their 20s, is that see a therapist, regardless of whether you're going through a tough time or not. And two is take an improv class. I think improv is the most amazing form of therapy anyone can ask for. It's fun, it's easy, and it allows you to kind of be yourself or be something completely different. And it allows you to make friends, and it's just a very freeing experience. And so those are two things that I tried to meld into the book, and everyone will let me know how successful I was in it.
I think you did pretty good. So I think it's a great read. Again, I think much success to you as well.
Thank you.
So Ada Calhoun, she is the author of St. Mark's is Dead, Wedding Toast I'll Never Give, and Why We Can't Sleep. She's also written for the New York Times, the New York Republic, and the Washington Post. She grew up in Manhattan and still resides in New York today. Her newest book, also a poet, Frank O'Hara, My Father and Me, is a result of looking at a toy. She was trying to go find something. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the book, the memoir, and how it came about?
Sure. Thank you, Julia. I'm a total bookstore junkie, and I have not been to the bookworm yet. I'm like trying to shop over your shoulder. Fantastic. I love a used new bookstore.
I know, it's fabulous. My happy place.
Actually, it looks really good. So I
Thank you.
hope to go there one day.
Thank you.
And also, I'm going to say, Iman, I can't wait to read your book because I had an assistant job at Vogue in my 20s. And it's, very, very Devil Wears Prada, but I can't wait to read the update. All of your books sound really great. So I was in my parents' basement in the East Village of Manhattan, looking for a toy for my goddaughter. I have 8 godchildren. I'm a little compulsive collecting godchildren. And this was about 3 years ago. And I was looking for the toy and I found this trove of cassette tapes from the 1970s. They had names on them like Willem de Kooning and Kenneth Koch and Barbara Guest. And I was like, what is all this? So I asked my father, who's a writer for the New Yorker. His name is Peter Sheldall. He's an art critic. And I was like, what is all this? And he had been the official biographer for the poet Frank O'Hara in the 1970s when I was a baby. He never finished the book. But there's all this material. And my day job, when I'm not writing my own books, I write books for other people. I'm a ghostwriter. So I've done 20 books as a ghostwriter, including a lot of bestsellers. I often only get about 10 hours of material from celebrities to do their books. And this was like 40 hours of tape. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, we could do this afternoon. Like, let's just knock this out. He was getting close to 80. I thought this would be really good for us. Not only would I like win, and I've always, there's always been a little bit of sort of competition or kind of tension with my dad. I was like, I'll be able to do something he can't do. And it will be nice for us also. So I was like, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to kill it. It's going to be great. My husband compares me to Mr. Wolf, from Pulp Fiction as like the murder cleanup specialist. So I was like, that's what we're going to do here. I did not win. So that is the spoiler of the book is I crashed and burned in a rather spectacular way with the estate the same way that he had. And also my father and I fought the entire time I was working on it. So he also, while I was doing this, was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And my parents' building burned up in a freak electrical fire, and then COVID hit within 3 months.
Oh.
So it wound up being like the sort of life took over the book. I was going to do this biography, and it wound up being a memoir about me and my dad, and my efforts to try to do this book. There is a lot about Frank O'Hara still in the book. I think it actually functions a little bit as a biography because I used so much of the material from the tapes in the course of telling the story about me and my dad. So it's kind of like it's sort of a culmination of all my books, I think. And where like I did St. Mark's is Dead, and it was a history of the street I grew up on in the East Village. So it's got a lot of sort of bohemia, New York City, nightlife-y stuff. And then I did this sort of Close Relationships Are Hard essay collection called Wedding Toast I'll Never Give. And it's a little bit about that, like being close to people is difficult. And then I did this book in 2020 called Why We Can't Sleep, Women's New Midlife Crisis, that was about the sort of comically poor timing of Generation X women trying to take care of parents and children and have a career at the same time. So this is sort of has elements of all of those things, I would say. And it wound up being sort of more universal than a biography because it's sort of about what do you do with an imperfect parent, right? We always had this hard time with each other. And, here he is possibly dying. He's still alive. Another spoiler. But, what do you do? Like, right, you love them, but also they're very difficult and you want to be like a good child, but also you want to be your own person. So it winds up being kind of about loving somebody and how you love them even through this difficulty. And the good news I'll say also is that I wrote the book like thinking my father actually would not live to read it, and therefore it is quite honest. Some have said brutal, but it's not mommy dearest. It's not a takedown. And in the end, he loves the book, and he said it gave him this sort of peace And it's been this wonderful experience for me and him in a very unusual way.
And that's actually one of the questions I had. I think it's, you know, having a parent myself who's up in age and has some health issues, you of course look at time differently. So I can imagine the time you guys spent together writing was valuable time in and of itself. But how hard also was it to actually have him kind of oversee? You kind of went to him for history. You kind of went to him for his tapes and background. So how hard was it for you to have your imprint? And I know you're ghostwriting, so you're used to having people kind of tell you what to do and where they want it to go, but it's a little different when it's dad.
Yeah.
So
well,
how was that?
It's such a good question, because I kind of thought going into it that it would be that there would be some kind of element of collaboration. And in the course of writing the book, I actually got so much confidence to just like do my own book. It wound up being a memoir, and it's just like, it's my book, you know, like I took some of the material, but you know, it's sort of about how you become a writer and how you actually decide that you deserve to say what you want to say. I think especially as women, you know, this a friend of mine who's a writer, Abbott Kaler, she writes under Karen Abbott sometimes, who I think some of you have hosted to, like some of the booksellers here. I've seen events with her there. She told me while I was working on it, she's like, you know, women, especially writers, need to like be 10% more narcissistic, right? You just have to like amp it up a little bit and just like get a little bit more sure of yourself. Another person I talked to when I was working on the book is Adam Horovitz from the Beastie Boys, who went to my same elementary school. And he said, you know, we were talking about the East Village, and there was this bar on my block, and I, you know, I was like, what was the drinking age? And somebody was like, oh, you have to reach the bar and then you can drink there. And he was like, no, the drinking age is confidence. And so I was saying, like, actually, I think confidence is like the drinking age for everything, right? Like to write a book, to be like, I deserve to publish something. I have something to say. It really, you have to kind of psych yourself up. So the book is actually really about psyching myself up to say, you know, this is my story now.
Nice. And I loved all the reads. It was great. And I love how in each book I was kind of taken back home. I haven't been with COVID, I haven't been home in a few years. So and I miss New York. So while we're on New York, I thought, since I miss New York a lot, let's do some quick trivia, like a little quick round table. One of the things I miss the most, oddly enough, because I did not like it when I was there, is of course trains and subways. Grand Central, Penn Station, which is your fave? You have a fave? You're on mute, Adrian.
A favorite train station? Sorry, I just wanted.
Yeah, Grand Central or Penn Station. Although they're so similar, like Grand Central to me, absolutely love Grand Central. Love picking up those $10 flowers every Friday. Or Junior's cheesecake. Not so much with Penn Station. Not a fan of Penn Station. But they're
new station, Julia. You have to come. It's new now. They put it in the post office. It's incredible.
It's a nice new. But do they have all the fun stuff like Grand Central?
My favorite was always the Port Authority bus terminal.
Yeah.
There's no more noir place in New York City. And if you're a noir writer and you're looking for inspiration, just spend 15 minutes at Port Authority. All of human life is there.
It's there. Absolutely.
And, you know, just the panic in people's faces as they realize their bus is half an hour late and they're going to have to spend half an hour more in the bowels of hell of Port Authority. So that's my favorite place. Anytime I blank on the misery of human existence, I just go down to Port Authority, especially like 10:30 on a Saturday night. Oh, it's great. The atmosphere is pulls off the walls.
I have to say, you know, so when I was writing about the East Village, everyone is so nostalgic for their period of the East Village, right?
Yeah.
Like they're like, oh my God, the 70s were so amazing. It's like, that's never going to be New York again. I'm like, it is still 1977 in Port Authority every day. Like just go there. And it's just exactly what New York was back then.
Well, I always think about the East Village is if everybody I saw wearing a CBGB's t-shirt had actually gone to CBGB's, it would still be in existence.
Exactly.
There's like 10 million of those t-shirts out there, but every time you go to CBGB's, there'd be like 6 people in there.
Exactly.
And you go, no, place closed.
You know what my theory is? I think that Penn Station is the train station that people who aren't from New York use to come into New York. And Grand Central is the train station that people who are from New York use to get out of New York.
Yep.
So I think if you want to watch New Yorkers like trying to escape for an hour and forget their lives, Grand Central. If you want to watch a ton of really excited people from right across the bridge come in for a sports game, Penn Station. I think that they're two different functions. And the new Penn Station, by the way, is too big to operate. Like I got lost in the old Penn Station, and I've been here my whole life. The two entrances were too much. Now that there are 7 different ways to enter Penn Station and exit Penn Station, I mean, I need like an hour alone just to navigate my way to whatever part of Penn Station I am.
However, if you're a train buff, the new Moynihan Train Hall at Penn Station, it's a cathedral. I mean, it's the cathedral. I mean, New York has 3 great cathedrals of rail. It's got the Oculus, it's got the new Penn Station, and it's got Grand Central. And that's like, it should be proud of the fact that it's got 3 absolutely gorgeous railway stations.
Look, I appreciate respectful disagreement as much as the next person, but there's only one answer here, and that's Penn Station, because Penn Station has a TGIF that I spent much time on. And so that's the correct answer. I'm so sorry. You guys all know that there's no other answer for best New York.
Oh my God. Guys, the glow of recognition in everyone's eyes right now as they picture the Amtrak TGI, like everyone at the same time went, oh, yes. The final point has been made.
You can pay $20 for a glass of wine, that is like, an inch deep. I mean, you just have to take that opportunity. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love this conversation. And before we head out, because we are running out of time, but I miss it. Granted, Atlanta has some great food, but it is not New York City food. Favorite, when you guys are traveling, what's the first thing when you come back home you have to have? I can tell you, for me, I hit pizza, Chinese, and bagels. All in that row. What about you guys?
I'll go first, because I have a very easy answer, which is anytime I go back to New York, and I was literally just there this weekend, there's a restaurant in Union Square called Lout, which is a it's kind of Singaporean, Malaysian restaurant. One of the best restaurants I've ever eaten at. Every time I go back to New York, and I'm back like once a month or so, I always make a reservation and go there. I would go there by myself or with friends or whatever. It's my favorite restaurant. That's a must for me. But you're right, no other city is a food city in the way New York is.
Yeah.
And for me, it's going to go back to St. Mark's Place. Tumbling out of a bar at 2:00 in the morning and getting a $1 slice. Oh my God, there's no finer food on this earth made by human hand. Those greasy $1 slices and one in the morning. Oh, fantastic. I defy anyone to beat that. That is absolutely the best.
That's very good. Yeah. Okay. So we're staying in the East Village. I'm going to go Ukrainian food at Veselka. Similar, Adrian, 2 a.m. pierogies and blintzes. You kind of can't do better. And then in my neighborhood, I live in Williamsburg now, Brooklyn, and there's a place called Pies and Thighs that's actually Southern food. It's like fried chicken and waffles and stuff like that. And that's sort of my go-to in my neighborhood. Great.
What you got, Iman, before we head off?
I need to know where everyone was living in the East Village. I actually grew up off of University Place. So also am 18 is 12. You guys are talking, you're throwing St. Mark's out there, you're throwing Veselka, and I'm quietly here lurking like, like nobody knows my secret. But yes, that was my first thing. Sorry to hijack your question. I am going to go with a restaurant called Persepolis. It's on the Upper East Side. It is one of the only traditional Persian restaurants in New York. It's family owned. I have been having dinner with my extended family, grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles every Sunday since I was little. To the point that I FaceTimed in when I left for school, which is the only time I've ever been permitted to leave New York for more than a month at a time. And Persepolis is one of those places where if I'm not there, I'm eating takeout from it. Everyone's my cousin, to the point that I don't know who's my actual cousin and who I just have to call cousin. But once you're Persian and in New York City, the odds of being related to another Persian go up to like 90%. So they're probably all blood related to me. But it's just one of those places that will always feel like home. So I think that everyone wants to feel at home in New York.
Yep, absolutely. You guys have been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
You guys have been great. We ran a little over, but it's New York. What do we do? So again, thank you. I wish you all much continued success. I hope to see you at the bookworm one day. Thank you everybody for joining in. I hope you guys have a great day. Enjoy the rest of New Voices, New Rooms, and I'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.